Now it's recording. See that? Okay, so let us begin. I got the water, and I want to start by just reading for you this paragraph. Did you all got a sheet of paper here?
No.
Pass it here. Pass it down. So first of all, welcome everyone. Good evening. Nice to see all of you. Great to get together and study Torah. I just wanted to read one paragraph from Harambam's introduction to his Mishneh Torah. And this paragraph contains two words that are key to understanding what the Gemara is. Okay? So really, I'm not going to give an introduction to Gemara now. That would take about 2-3 hours, and I have a few videos online. You can check it out on YouTube. I sent one of them last night. But I want to give you just explain two words regarding Gemara. Okay? And this will give you some context so that when we delve into the first Sugya, and I think tonight we'll be able to finish the first Sugya. So that's exciting. But read with me. The ones, the Hachamim that edited the Gemara were two Hachamim. One was Rabbeinu, the other is Rav Asher. They lived in Babylonia, and a little before the rise of Islam. They wanted to collate the entire oral law. You know that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, he received the oral law. They wanted to collate it because they realized that the judicial system, the judiciary, the Jewish people is going to be over. There will be no more High Court of Israel. So they said, let us now collate everything that we have in the Torah Shebe'al Peh, all the laws, and these are the two words. Skip to the bottom two lines. Rav Asher, together with his court, Shechiber HaTalmud. What does Chiber HaTalmud mean? Chiber literally means he edited. So meaning, it wasn't just a messy organization where he took different laws and just put them all, it was Chiber means it was an edited collection of works, right? But then the last word, Ugmaro. This is why the Gemara is called Gemara. Gemara is Aramaic for the Gemer. The Hebrew word is Gemer. So Gemer means, from the word Gemara, what does Gemara mean? Who knows the legal, technical meaning of Gemer? In Hebrew, the word ligmor means to finish. But there's a technical, legal meaning for the word Gemer. And that means, in judicial law, when the Bet Din deliberates about a topic and wants to reach a resolution, it's called Gemer. Gemer means this is the final judicial opinion of the court. So for example, there was recently a Supreme Court case regarding abortion, whether there is a constitutional right to abortion, whether there's not a constitutional right to abortion, and they had a deliberation, they went back and forth, and different sides arguing the thing, and they analyzed the issue and they reached whatever conclusion they reached. That's called Gemer. So what is the Gemara? The Gemara is the authorized final conclusions of the last Supreme Court of the Jewish people. That's what it is. Now you know what the Gemara is, right? The Gemara is not just a simple collection of stories or some people who just got together and put something together. No, this represents the legal opinion of the Hachamim of Israel sitting as a High Court of Israel, and they reach their final conclusion on the matter. So the Gemara today is law because there has been no other High Court of Israel. That's what Gemara is. And that's what I wanted to give you a little background so you know what we are studying, now that I gave you that. Next, what part of the Gemara are we studying? We're studying Seder Nezikim. You know that there's 6 Sedarim, right? We are studying a Seder called Nezikim. Nezikim has to do with financial matters, right? But it really deals with diverse issues. And I want to tell you that the Masechta that we're studying today is called Baba Mesi'a. Literally, what does the word Baba mean in Aramaic? Baba means gate. Who said gate? Gate, correct. So Baba Mesi'a means the middle gate. So we're studying a tractate called the middle gate. Okay. What do you think the Masechta before is called? Baba Kama, which means the first gate. And what do you think the Masechta after is called? Baba Bata, the last gate. So what is this about? Originally, there was a 30-chapter tractate. Huge! And it dealt with Nezikim. And the Hachamim decided to divide it into 3 parts because a huge 30-chapter tractate is just beyond comprehension. And they thought it would be easier if they divided it into 3 books, one of 10 chapters, the second of 10 chapters, the third of 10 chapters. The first called the first gate, second gate, third gate. We are studying the middle gate, right, which is Baba Mesi'a, What does Bava Mesi'a deal with? And I was told to make the introduction short. People want to get right to the Sugya. But I want to inject you into the Sugya, so it's not just abstract. What does it deal with? What is the subject matter of Bava Mesi'a? It deals with matters related to property law. And by property, I mean chattel, I don't mean real estate. Real estate is the next Mesi'a. It deals with loans, it deals with charging interest, it deals with how you have to pay your employees on time, what do you do with laborers, what rights laborers have. It deals with a various number of issues, but it doesn't deal with tort law. Tort law is in the first baba. Okay, so we are dealing with financial matters, business law. The closest in English, I would call it business law, because business law deals less with torts, personal injury, and more with, we entered into a contract, you said you would do this, you didn't do it, let's go to court and hash it out there. That's what we are studying today, okay? That's it. Introduction is done. At this point, you can now open up the pages. Next time, we will try to have more pages.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's good. No need to apologize. Everybody does a great job here. Thank you to Joey Shahova for organizing this amazing job. Thank you from Mikey for all the work. Thank you to everybody. There's a lot of people who are, I'm sure that I'm missing names. Somebody went to get the pizza. I don't know who did it. Somebody
Still
got
Mikey.
Also Mike, okay. So there's a lot. So thank you for all of you who are involved in setting this up. I want to read for you now the first Mishnah. We're now going to read the Mishnah. And then after we read the Mishnah, we're going to read the Gemara. So the Mishnah, just so you know, is a summary of the Torah Shebe'al Peh, prepared by Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And as we study more Gemara, I will give you more tidbits, I will give you more information about that. But for now, I'm letting you know the Mishnah is the summary of the Torah Shebe'al Peh, and the Gemara is going to analyze the Mishnah from the perspective of Halakha, from the perspective of law. It's going to interpret the Mishnah, it's going to reach conclusions about the Mishnah. But we're starting first with the Mishnah. Here is the topic. First three words. Here. Shenaim ochazin betaleh. That's the topic. Two people are holding on to the same garment. Alright? So they come into court. One is holding on tightly, the other is holding on tightly. There's no witnesses. If anybody lets go, it's over, right? So they're like, no, okay. So what's going on? Ze omer, ani misatiyah. There's two litigants. The first one says, the judge says, what are you doing here? He says, I found this. I found it. I found it first. The other one says, no. I found it first. There's no witnesses. If there was witnesses, you would just go to the witnesses, but they're not here. You have the place. Can I help you? I'll help you find the place.
Yeah, it's in English over here.
You have it in English. Okay. Another statement. One person is holding on again to the garment. He says, this belongs to me. I'm the owner. I said, no, I'm the owner. Now, if you're following the story, you already see there's something wrong here. This is case number one. Or is it? Again, I'm reading it again. There's two people. One says, I found it first. The other says, no, I found it first. Okay, continuing. One says, I'm the owner. The other one says, no, I'm the owner. There's a little ambiguity here. Are we dealing with one case? Meaning, is it the same two people who say, I found it first, are the ones who say, it belongs to me? Or is it two separate cases? Namely, case A, two people come to court, one says, I found it, the other says, I found it. And then case B is, it belongs to me. Why does it belong to you? Whatever. But it belongs to me. No, it belongs to me. There could be many reasons why there's a dispute as to who is the owner of a particular object, right? Maybe you say, you bought this laptop. No, I never sold it to you. Yeah, you bought. Right? It could be various reasons. So is it two cases or is it one case? The Gemara is going to deal with that very question. Tonight, we will be studying that specific question. All right? Well, let's finish the Mishnah first. What do we do? How do we resolve this issue? So these two people are grabbing this object. The Dayanim say the following. The Pesach Halacha is Zei Shavah She'eno B'Chafot Mesi'a. Litigant number one has to make an oath. The oath is, I own at least one half of this garment. And now notice again the Shavua. Listen to the Shavua. The Shavua he has to make is, I own at least a half of the garment. It's a strange Shavua. Because what is the claim? The claim is, I own the garment. Why are you making a Shavua that I own at least one half? Make a Shavua, I own the entire garment. And also, why make a Shavuah that I own at least one half? If it's one half, say I own half of the garment. A little strange, right? There's a little odd thing, right? I mean, we're telling the person make a Shavuah because presumptively he's not going to lie. Just so you know, by the way, to make a Shavuah back then was like, it was crazy stuff. Okay, they would bring out the Sefer Torah, right? And there would be a series of bar minan, kelalot, that they would say on anybody who makes a full Shavuah. And if somebody made a full Shavuah, it would be over. I think I once told you the story that there was two litigants who came before Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. And we don't make people make Shavuot today because we don't want anybody to die. We don't want any bar minan. We have enough problems in Am Yisrael. We don't need people making full Shavuot. So if you go today to court in a Beit Din in Israel, they're not going to make you make a Shavuot. But there was a situation where he came before Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, one of the litigants said, I want to make a Shavuah. I don't want to make a Pesharah. I don't want to make a compromise. I want to make a Shavuah. I am the owner of this particular asset, and I'm willing to make a Shavuah. And Rav Mordechai said, we don't do Shavuot. But he insisted. He says, I know the halakha. I want to make a Shavuah. You can't tell me no. Okay, he didn't want to do it, but the guy's coming, and he has a right. So, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says, no problem. Tomorrow night we can go to the knis. Like here, there's a knis. We'll take out the Sefer Torah, be here at 8 o'clock, and we'll make a Shavuah. What are we going to do? Everybody comes to knis except for the one who has to make a Shavuah. They're waiting. It's 8 o'clock. It's 8:15. It's 8:30. 8:45. They get a phone call. The guy died.
Wow.
Okay. So why am I saying that? You might look at this law and says, okay, the guy's making a Shavuah. So what? People were very scared to make Shavuot. It wasn't a simple thing to just make a Shavuot. Okay, people understood. You don't just make Shavuot on a Sefer Torah and it's okay. So if you're telling somebody to make a Shavuot, that's a way of verifying that he really is telling the truth. Okay, let's continue. So that's case number 1 or case number 1 and case 2. We don't know yet. Let's go to the next case. זה אומר כולה שלי. וזה אומר פסיה שלי. Next case. Litigant comes in, he says, this talet, he's holding on to it. He says, it all belongs to me. Other person says, no, that's not correct. I own half of it. So you see, in the first case, they both say we own 100% of it, right? Here, one says I own half. The second one says I own half. The first one says I own all of it. So what's the Shavuah in this case? I'm sorry, the person who says, I am the 100% owner of this garment, let's say, he makes a Shavuah that he owns no less than 75%, 3/4 of the garment. Okay, interesting. Why? Yeah, we're not going to know the answer today. That's a Sugya in a few pages, but it's a question. Why? Why no less than 75%? The person who says, I own 50% of the garment, I said, I own no less than 25%. So this is the first Mishnah. To summarize the first two cases, or the first case, because that's what we're going to be studying, the case is, this is what we're studying tonight, you can forget everything else except what I'm telling you now. Namely, Reuven and Shimon enter court. They're holding on to a talet. We just got beautiful taletot. They have the chelet on it, right? Beautiful misvah. We're doing the misvah of the chelet. So they come in with a talet, maybe a real talet. Doesn't have to be a real talet. It could be a garment. But they come in with a talet. One says, I own this talet. The other guy says, I own the talet. Each one has to make a Shavuah. What's a Shavuah? I own no less than 50%. And what do we do with that? Cut it down the middle. You got half, you got half. We don't have to cut it. We can take it, sell it, and then you get 50% of the proceeds. You get 50% of the proceeds. You don't have to destroy the talet, right? Of course, that's obvious. But I want you to understand. So this is clear. The Mishnah is clear, right? Did I explain it well? You understand it? You ready for the Gemara? Let's go to the Gemara.
This is like Shlomo Melech when he took the baby.
Yeah.
So my baby, your baby, cut it in half.
Cut it in half, exactly. Exactly. So we don't have to cut it in half. We can keep it. In fact, the next Mishnah deals. They were riding like an animal, like a horse or a donkey. It says it doesn't mean you cut the animal in half, right? It means you sell the animal and you give 50% of the proceeds to one and 50% of the proceeds to the other. So yes.
But if you cut it, it's vertical or horizontal?
So that's it. We don't right down the middle. Well, you don't cut it. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. Okay, let's read the first sugya. The first sugya is a very simple sugya. I'm going to tell you the structure. It's sugya kefula. Sugya kefula means that it's a two-part sugya. Okay? Part one will propose a thesis about the Mishnah. I'll give you the map of the sugya, very simple. Part one, again, will propose a thesis about the Mishnah. Part two will reject the thesis proposed in part one, and will offer a counter thesis. That's it. Part one, you're going to have a thesis, and there's going to be 3 questions which will be answered. Part two, again, rejects the original thesis. It proposes another thesis, some clarification. That's it. That's all sugya. Now, what is going to be the topic? The topic is in the first line of the sugya. I'm going to read it for you. And if I skip something, that means that I didn't write the sugya properly in my notes, so please correct me, but I don't think I skipped anything. למה לי ניתנה? זה אומר אני מסתיר. וזה אומר אני מסתיר. Why does the Mishnah have to speak in a verbose manner? How is the Mishnah verbose? Because it repeated the same situation by using extra words. Namely, it said, the litigants come in. One says, Ani Mesi'a, I found the talet first. I found the talet first. And then there was the second case, which is actually a continuation of the first case. The other case was, I am the full owner of this talet. And he said, no, I am the full owner of the talet. It's very verbose. Litne hada. Let the Mishnah mention one case. I want you to understand. Who cares? When you read a Supreme Court decision in America, sometimes they're verbose. Yeah, you think that they sit down and they count every single word and they say, wait, hold on. We've repeated this is something we kind of said, let's try to shorten it. No. So why do we care whether the Mishnah is using extra words, is not using extra words? I mean, the whole premise of the question, to us Westerners, we're all Westerners here, we read stories. Sometimes when you hear a politician speaking on TV, they're very verbose, they repeat themselves in slightly different ways just to make a point, right? For rhetorical reasons. Why is it so important that the Mishnah needs to use as few words as possible? It's a very important question. I want to answer it for you now. You have to understand what the Mishnah was. The Mishnah was a summary of all the Torah Shebe'al Peh. Okay, very good. What is the Torah Shebe'al Peh? How do you translate the word Torah, the words Torah Shebe'al Peh into English? Somebody help me here.
Mikey.
Word, or why is it word of mouth? Because it was learned by heart. Torah Shebe'al Peh literally means that part of the Torah that you know by heart. Now let me explain this to you. When Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote the Torah Shebe'al, when he wrote the Mishnayot, what was he thinking? Until now, everything was Be'al Peh. Why did he want to write the Mishnah? Right. Because he didn't want it to be lost, didn't want it to be forgotten, and he knew that soon the Romans are going to destroy everything, and there's going to be no more Jewish presence in Israel, and there's going to be Galut, So he wanted to create a text that people will be able to study by heart. And they studied it by heart, by the way. If you want to get into the yeshiva in Babylonia, you say, I want to be a Talmid in the yeshiva in Babel, you have to know the Mishnah Be'al Peh. Right? Now, in order to know the Mishnah Be'al Peh, there should be some minimum condition in editing the Mishnah. What do you think the minimum condition is? Brevity. Density of language. So you're going to see this a lot in the Gemara. Many times the Gemara says, why did you use that word? Who cares why I use that word? I don't know why I use that word. Did I ask that question when I read a Supreme Court case in America? Does anybody lawyer ever ask about a previous case? They use that extra word. Really? But in the case of the Mishnayot, it's important. Rabbeinu HaKadosh was constant, when he edited the Mishnah, and he was together with his Betim, they edited the Mishnah, they tried to create a very dense text, right? So that the sentences in the Mishnah, every single sentence, every word is rich with meaning. And that's why the Gemara asks the question. I'm going to read it again. Lama li nemitna? Why does the Mishnah have to say, Ze omer ani misatia? This litigant says, I found it first. Ze omer ani misatia. The other litigant says, no, I found it first. Ze omer ulashali. The first litigant who already said, I found it first, says, I own it completely. It's mine. You just said you found it first, right? So obviously, if you said you found it first, you own it, right? Just say one sentence. Okay. Answer. So hada katanet. This is, I said, part one has a thesis about the Mishnah. This is the thesis. We are now going to read the thesis of part one. Hada chataneh. This two sentences in the Mishnah which appear or which lend themselves to the idea that it's actually two separate cases. It's not two cases. It's actually one case. The one case is Omer ani Mesi'a lekula sheli. One person comes in and he says, I found it, and therefore I own it. I want to explain what that means in a moment. V'zeh Omer ani Mesi'a. The other person, no, I found it first. Lekula sheli, and therefore I own it. Okay. What does that mean? What type of sentence is that?
Someone's lying.
Someone's lying, obviously, but what does it mean? I found it and I own it. Okay, I want to explain that. There was a statement of fact and there was a legal conclusion. When the person says, Ani Mesi'a, it is legitimate for me to enter the court and say, I found this first. That's an empirical fact. That's my testimony. My testimony is, I ran, I got it, I picked it up, and this guy came afterwards and he's trying to pull it away from me. But I found it first. And what is the legal conclusion? He is telling the judges, and because I found it first, I own it. You understand? So it's a two-part statement. The first part of the statement is, Ani Mesi'a, fact, that's a fact. Second part of the statement, legal conclusion, I own it. Fact, I found it. Conclusion, I own it. So it's a very intelligent statement. It's not just a redundant statement. So the Mishnah is telling us that the litigants who are coming before the Dayanim, they're intelligent people who understand the law, they understand the way the law works, and because they understand the way the law works, they speak in an intelligent manner, right? So that's the thesis of part one. The thesis of part one is that it's one statement. It's not two statements. All right. But now we are going to question it, because you can imagine that inside the yeshiva there was many chachamim, and there were great minds, and they're having this deliberation, and they're not just going to accept the fact that you're making this thesis or stating a thesis and just accept it. They're going to analyze it. So there's going to be a series of 3 questions. The purpose of these 3 questions is to see whether the thesis stands up to deliberation. Question number 1. Benitne ani Mesi'a ve'ana yadana lekula sheli. Question number 1. Fair enough. The litigants are coming to court. They say each one claims I found it first. Do we need... Now the Dayanim are standing there, and they're making this statement of fact, testimony, I found it first. Does it make sense for the litigants to now come before the judges and say, and therefore the halakha is XYZ? Do the judges need the help of the litigants to tell them, by the way, because I found it first, the halakha is I own it? Is that the way you come before the Dayanim, right? No, you come before the Dayanim, you're asked a question. The Dayanim are not there to learn from you what the halakha is. The Dayanim are there to learn from you what took place. So the Dayanim are going to ask you, what are you doing here? Answer, I found it first. Good, thank you. Now you tell me, what are you doing here? No, I found it first. Thank you. Let's make a diyun now. Let's make a deliberation. Who is the owner? We don't need you to tell us, the judges, what the law is, right? It's a little different than in American law, because in American law, the lawyers are coming into court, and they're always advocating their position, and they're standing before the Supreme Court, and they try to show how abortion is constitutionally protected. It's not constitutionally protected. There's back and forth arguments, and everybody's advocating their position. Here, it is up to the Dayanim to know the law perfectly and to reach a judicious decision regarding the situation. So we don't need them to tell us, Ani Mesi'a lekula sheli. So it's not a very... If that was the case, that the Mishnah is describing one case where a person is making 2 statements, I found it and I own it, a bit difficult, a bit sloppy, right?
I don't think so.
The Gemara, okay, let's wait for the Gemara, because I don't want to jump the gun. I want to see how the Gemara deals with it. But you understand the question, right?
I have a quick question. Doesn't it say when you find something, it's not yours, you don't own it? No? Don't you have to hold it as collateral until somebody claims it?
That's going to
It's not
be...
ownership?
That is going to be one of the subjects that we deal with soon, okay? The question is, what does it mean, I found it. We didn't even deal with that yet, but you are correct. In the common law, there is what's known as the lost property law, the common law of England, and there's other common law countries. And there was a case in the common law of England. It was called Amory versus Delamare. It was at 1772 in England, where there was a chimney cleaner, a young boy who was a chimney cleaner, and while he was cleaning somebody's house, he found a jewel that did not belong to the owner of the house. So he found, I think it was a ring, I don't remember what it was. Anyway, he took it to a jeweler, and the jeweler cleaned it and polished it and made it more valuable, and the jeweler refused to return it. So they came to court, and the judge says, "Why are you not returning the ring?" He found it. He says, "Yeah, but I improved it, and because I improved it, I should have ownership in the ring. It's now more valuable." The judge said, and you ever hear of the expression, possessions is 9/10 of the law? Right, possession is 9/10 of the law. Jewish law recognizes the power of possession. So I didn't explain what it means. Just to finish that common law case in England, the judge said because he had possession of the ring before you, and the original owner cannot be found, he owns it, right? He automatically attained ownership of the ring at the moment he picked up the ring for the purposes of ownership. He owns it at that moment. So when he gave it to you, Mr. Jeweler, to fix it, you were fixing his ring. You weren't fixing a ring, right? You were fixing a ring that had an owner, and the owner was this young chimney boy. So he ruled in favor of the chimney boy. So here also, what do we mean when we say, "I found it"? That's an excellent question. I will deal with that question because the Gemara, and you'll see, what do we call it when we're studying Gemara? We call it a Sugya, the zip and Sugya. So every part, or every time you study Gemara, you're in a particular Sugya. Sugya means Melashon Su, a very closed unit, like a species. So you have this closed unit. Everything is going to be in the Sugya. So the question you ask is a good question, and that's what the Sugya is going to answer the question. You understand? Just one more question, and then we'll get on.
Differentiating the idea from finding it and touching it first?
Oh, interesting. We will see. Is it enough to touch it?
I'm saying it's like ownership, like the idea of like you grab it first.
We will answer that question. That is an excellent question, and the Sugya will deal with it. What constitutes ownership? Okay, we will see that. Okay, gentlemen. Well, last question. Yeah, go ahead.
I find some ambiguity here
Yeah.
in the fact that could he be the owner and he lost it?
No.
And then we found
No, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with a situation where neither was the owner. We don't know who the original owner was. If we knew who the original owner was, that neither of these people fighting over this talet will have a right to it because they know who the original owner is. So we are dealing with a situation where there is no owner to the talet, and therefore the owner by default becomes a person or persons who find the talet. Let us continue. So the thesis, we understand the thesis is, as it was, the question is a very valid question. Why would you assume that the litigants are coming to court to explain the law to the judges? The judges do not need the litigants to explain the law to them. The judges are very capable of understanding the law themselves. So, answer as follows. Itana ani mesatiha haba amina mai mesatiha re'itiha. If we would put into the mouth of each litigant, "I found it." Imagine the Mishnah says, two people are grabbing a talet. One person, "I found it." And that's it. What would you think the word mesatia, "I found it," what does that mean? So colloquially, when you say, "I found something," I saw it first.
I claim it?
I claim it. I said, "It's mine." "Oh, that's mine." I think in the schoolyard when we were growing up, somebody finds something in the schoolyard. Who's the person who owns it? Whoever sees it first. "That's mine. I called it. It's mine. I called it." So you would say, what do the words "I found it" mean? I saw it first. I claimed it was mine. It's mine. Anina itiha. That's what you would think. That is a misconception that could be reached if you just said the words "ani mesatia." So hava amina, I would conclude from this, "my mesatiha ve'itiha," I would conclude that the word "found it" means I saw it, even though I didn't get physical possession of it. Just seeing it is enough. Tana, ula sheli, de bere'iyah la kaneh. That's why the Mishnah says not just I found it, because that could be ambiguous. You say, I own it. Why the extra words, I own it? To indicate it wasn't just I saw it, something additional happened. What was the additional thing that happened? So in Jewish law, and this is Yoni's point, in order to receive ownership of an object, you have to actually pick it up. So there's different ways to have kinyan, but one of the ways to have kinyan, let's say I want to sell you this phone. So let me give you an example. You love this phone, it's whatever, you must have this phone, they don't sell it anymore, and we enter into an agreement. What do you want to pay me for it? So he said, I'm going to pay you $100. Pay $100. Okay, now I want $200. Okay, $200. We agree on $200. Now I still have the phone, right? And as we're talking about this and we reach an agreement to have $200, the third person comes. I'm on the subway, takes the phone, runs away. I tell the guy, can you give me my money? Give me the $200. And the guy's like, well, I agreed to pay you $200 for a phone. I didn't agree to pay you $200 for, a mugging or whatever you want to call that. I'm not giving you $200. We go to court. The Dayan is going to rule in favor of the other person because we agreed. There was an agreement that I give him the phone. That agreement is oral agreement and it's binding. No problem. You should do what you commit to do. No problem. But I owned the phone at the time. He didn't own the phone. So the loss is upon me, the owner, not upon him, the person who wanted to buy but didn't buy it yet. On the other hand, if I gave him the phone and now it's in his hand, and now the mugger came and took the phone, he lost. He said, I want my money back. But you already have the phone. Once you have the phone, you become the owner. I have the money. You have the phone. But even if he didn't give me the money, I want to give you another case. Let's say I give him the phone, and now he's about to give me the money. The phone gets robbed, and the money gets robbed. I'm like, give me the money for the phone. I said, what are you talking about? I just got mugged. What are you talking about? We go to court. I got the money because he was the owner of the phone, and the agreement was he will get the phone, and he did get the phone. Maybe for a second, I should be getting the money. He didn't give me the money. Pay up the money. You understand? So the idea of possession is 9/10 of the law, and I mean there's validity to that, right? In Judaism, in Jewish law, you need to actually have physical possession. That is one of the ways to get ownership. I'm talking about chattel, I'm not talking about real estate. Real estate is different. Obviously, you're not going to have physical possession of real estate. There's animals. How do you get ownership of animals? How do you get ownership of different objects? Different subject. But for now, okay, the phone or garment. Garment is really easy. Talet. You grab the garment. You physically possess the garment. You become the owner. Okay.
Rabbi, the kinyan chametz.
Oh, okay. Because what they do in the Hamas is what's called the Kinyan Suda. So a Kinyan Suda, the theory, I want to give you the theory because the people who do it, I mean, even if I am, and you know that I'm Mahmir on this, but the theory that they're following is that one of the ways to do Kinyan is through a Suda. And once the person takes the Suda for the purposes of transferring the ownership is transferred. That's the idea of.
But that includes everybody?
I mean, so that's a problem. I mean, that's where there could be some, b'mchilat kavod, but I don't necessarily do it for myself. I don't tell other people what to do, but that's a kinyan suda. So there's different types of kinyan. One of them is kinyan suda. Okay. By the way, when the lady gets married and they give the ketubah, they do kinyan suda to ensure that there's there's legally binding and that the shetar has been transferred to the kala. That's why they do the kinyan suda as well.
But when you find something, don't you have a certain amount of time to find the original owner?
A different subject.
Different subject.
Different subject. Okay, question number 2. So you're telling me that the reason the Mishnah has to say, I found it and I own it, right? You said, why? Because we're worried that if it just said, I found it, you will say, oh, just seeing it is enough. That's your concern, right? Is that a valid concern? It says Rabbeinu, the older criticizes Rabbeinu, not Rabbeinu. Umsata. Let me read to you the pasuk in the Torah. There is a pasuk that says as follows. It's in Perashah Kitaset. The pasuk says, if your friend's donkey is missing, return it to him. If your friend's clothing is missing, you return it to him. Anything that your friend loses, there's a misvat aseh deoraita to return the lost object to the friend, right? Misvat aseh. It's called misvat hashevat aveda. Now the pasuk says, you do this to any thing that your friend lost. Wum sata. What does wum sata mean? that you found. The same word as the Mishnah. Ani mesatiha, I found it. What word does the Torah use? Umsata, the same word. You found it, you return it. Same word. On this word, there was a Chacham called Rabbeina, and this Chacham made the following diuk on the word, analysis, and it's as follows. When it says umsata, what does the Torah mean umsata? The atai le'adeh mashma. It means that you took possession of the object. If you didn't take possession of the object, you're not considered to be a person who found it. It's only by taking possession that you're considered to be somebody who found it, right? So if this is the case, how can you tell me that the word I found it is somehow ambiguous? How can you say that the word I found it maybe would be interpreted to mean I saw it? But we know that the word I found it in Hebrew doesn't mean I saw it. It means I actually took it in my hand. So the Mishnah could have said, Zeh omer ani misatiya. One guy says I found it, and we know what does I found it mean. I have possession of it, and that's it. Problem solved. So why are you telling me that I need to emphasize the fact that if I found it, we don't mean he saw it, we mean he actually physically possesses the object? Very strange. Hebrew is Hebrew. Words are words. Words have meaning. You can't ignore the meaning of a word, right? So the Gemara is going to give an answer. I'm going to read to you the answer of the Gemara. I'm going to explain to you the answer superficially, and then I'm going to give you the real meaning of the answer. So let me now read the answer. In is like in Arabic, like what does it mean in Arabic? Yes, in Aramaic. In means yes, you are correct. When the Torah says the word I found it, or you found it, or he found it, the word found it means de ata le'adeh mashma. It means he has physical possession of the object. He actually is picking it up. That's what I found it means. That's correct. We saw it. Umihu tana. But when the author of our Mishnah wrote our Mishnah, Lishana de Almanaka, he wasn't using the language of the Torah. He was using the colloquial usage of the word I found it. And colloquially, I found it means umidehazele. When we speak just amongst ourselves and say, I found it, we're right, go. Okay. When you say I found it, you mean ana ashkahid. You mean I saw it first. I called it, right? I'm not actually holding the object. I saw it first. That watch is mine. Don't touch it. I go over and take it, right? So there's a difference between the colloquial usage, which I found it means I saw it, and the usage in the Torah where I found it means I actually have physical possession. Our Mishnah is based on the colloquial usage, not on the Torah usage.
Rabbi, is the right term discovered? I discovered it?
No, Mesi'a, limsa. Mesi'a, I found
I
it.
could see a lot of things, but when I discovered it, I saw it first,
Yeah, but to discover is, how do you say in Hebrew, legalot? No, Mesi'a. Legalot means in Hebrew, at least, something was covered, and then you uncover it. Here, Mesi'a, it's right there. Anybody can walk by, wait, nobody owns that. I got it, it's mine, I take it. I want to ask you a question.
So the same meaning in Aramaic?
No, it's not Aramaic. Umsata is a Hebrew word. Mem sadi aleph. I want to ask a question though. So just to summarize where we're at now. Okay, just to summarize, the thesis was that the Mishnah actually contains a single case, not two cases. And in this single case, each litigant comes and says the following: Ani mesatiya, I found it. V'kula sheli, and I'm the full owner. We said, why does he have to say, and I'm the full owner? To express the fact that he didn't just see it, but he also picked it up, right? And the question that was asked is, but in the Torah, to find something means that you picked it up. So again, what do you have to say? I found it and I found it. I found it and I picked it up. Well, I found it means I picked it up. What do you have to say? I want to explain this to you. And this is actually a good place to tell you a little about linguistics. There was a great linguist, his name was Ferdinand de Saussure. He was from Switzerland, I don't remember, beginning of the 20th century. And he says that language has two axes. There's a synchronic axis and there's a diacritic axis. I want to explain this to you. It's actually quite interesting. And linguistics in general is quite interesting, at least to me. So he says that if you look at language, there is a synchronic axis meaning how do we use words today at this point in time? Right now we all speak English, right now we all use the same words, right now we understand the words that we're speaking. That's called the synchronic axis. How do we use language now? But there is another aspect to language. The other aspect to language is called the diachronic aspect. The diachronic aspect is the evolution of words over the course of time. I'll give you an example. What does the word awful mean today? Awful. Oh my gosh, that book was awful. It means terrible, right?
The pizza's awful.
What? The pizza's awful? Okay. That would mean that it does not taste good. So the word awful, we all know what it means. In the synchronic axis, it means terrible. Okay. But if you look at Middle English, originally the word awful meant full of awe. It was used to describe something awe-inspiring. So I can see a beautiful painting about maybe a biblical scene, and I say, this is awful. I don't mean it's terrible. I mean, I'm inspired. I'm filled with awe. If somebody says a rabbi's speech today, after the Shabbat, somebody's going to play this on me. Rabbi, your speech was awful today. Right? So awful means terrible. We say, no, I meant it in the sense of Middle English. Middle English, it means awe-inspiring. Okay. So you see how the change in the meaning of the word is in the diachronic axis, right? Another word, nice, right? In middle, you all know what the word nice means, something pleasing, right? In Middle English, the word nice, you know what it actually meant? Foolish, stupid. So if you said a person is nice, you meant to say he's a fool, right? On the other hand, if you said that somebody is silly, today silly means not serious, right? In Old English, the word silly meant a person who was blessed or happy. All right, I mean, there's many words like this. So this is so important. Because, the Chachamim were really intelligent people. And you have to understand the Chachamim in terms of these intelligent ideas. So when the Chachamim say in the Torah, the word means this, but we use it this way today. Everybody's like, come on, can you give me something serious? Yeah. That really is serious. What the Chachamim are saying is, there's a diachronic axis, and if I now am a judge, right, and I'm looking at a contract, and I see words in the contract, and I want to interpret the contract, yeah? You enter into a contract, two people come in, and I want to say, you owe him $100 based upon the contract. I can't look at the word and say, but 100 years ago the word meant this, 2,000 years ago the word meant that. I have to look at the words according to the synchronic axis. That's exactly what the Sugya is saying. Don't tell me that 2,000 years ago, when Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah from Mount Sinai, and he used the word Mesi'a, and back then the word Mesi'a meant I actually have possession. That's what it means today. It doesn't mean that today. Today the word Mesi'a means I saw it. That's the way it's used. So that's such an important fundamental thing. So you see how the study of linguistics and ideas of structuralism are actually quite useful in understanding the Chachamim precisely because they themselves saw the wisdom that later on some of the Western world developed, but it was already there in the Torah before these people in the Western world developed these ideas. Okay, that was question number 2. We have question number 3, and once we finish question number 3, that will be the end of part 1, and we will go to part 2. Go ahead, Mike.
Only because it's coming from the Mishnah, and you said because of brevity and being very deep and dense and precise, when he uses that word, he knows full well that we're going to reflect back on the Torah's language, and which is eternal,
right,
in its understanding of the word.
Right. Nevertheless, when we use language, when language is used in the Mishnah, it's used according to the spoken language of the day. By the way, it's an incredible thing, and I'm not going to digress, but I'm going to tell you, Parashat Mikes? Parashat Mikes describes the story of Yosef in Egypt, right? The story of Joseph in Egypt is described in Parashat Mikes. And there was a great Chacham, his name was Avraham Shalom Yahudai, it was about 150 years ago, maybe a little more actually, and maybe close to 200 years ago. And he wrote a book. He was an expert in Semitic languages. He was an expert in Egyptology, he studied archaeology in Egypt, and he found that many of the words used in Parashat Mikes are actually words that were used in those days in Egypt, right? So it says, everybody is going to be kissing the words that you say. So Joseph is now the viceroy. Anything he says, people will listen to. You never see that any place else in the Torah. Everybody's going to kiss your words or will kiss it. He shows that in Egypt, that was actually the way you did it. You actually had to kiss. And that kiss was a sign of, I accept what was just said. And so it's incredible. So the use of language in the Torah is incredibly precise and remarkably so. So when we speak, we always have to use we look at the synchronic axis and we speak using the words in the synchronic axis. What does the word girl mean today? There was a time when the word girl meant a young boy, young girl. Today it means a girl, right? And so on and so forth. If a person says, it's synagogue, a person says, I am gay. He doesn't mean I'm happy today, right? Oh, but when I said that, I meant that was happy. You're confusing. If you're saying that, then you're not speaking precisely. So you always have to use the precise language according to the way it's used at the time. Let us now ask the last question on the thesis of this part of the Sugya was that when the Mishnah said, or has a litigant saying, Ani Mesi'a, I found it. It has a litigant saying, I own it. It wasn't redundant language. It was done intentionally. The intention was that if I just say, I found it, you may reach the mistaken conclusion that seeing creates ownership. It says, I own it to show that there has to be something beyond seeing to create ownership. Last question on that thesis. I think this is an obvious question. Okay, let's see if we can figure out the third question before I even ask it. Again, you have this idea, you want to say that these people came to court, and each one wants to express the idea that he is the owner of this object because he picked it up first. Right? So you can't say Ani Mesi'a, because if you only say Ani Mesi'a, I found it, the implication will be seeing is enough to create ownership, which is an incorrect implication, or the inference rather would be that. So you have to say I own it, because by saying I own it, you mean I actually physically have it. Right? So what could the Mishnah have said? Just say I own it. Instead of the litigants coming in and saying Ani Mesi'a, I found it, and I own it. I have the litigant say I own it. That's not confusing. Nobody thinks I own it means I saw it. I own it means you're kula sheli, I have it. It's with me. That's not ambiguous, right? Okay, that's a question. That's the third and final question. Again, this was the thesis, and you can see that in the yeshiva. They were struggling with the meaning of the Mishnah, and they reach a conclusion. The conclusion is going to be this is the meaning of the Mishnah. Let the litigants come to the judges and say, I have it. It's mine. And then you don't have to say Ani Mesi'a. Ani Mesi'a is a confusing term. Why say the words Ani Mesi'a? That's question number 3. And the answer, so I'm going to fix something in my notes. Yeah. And the answer is, if the Mishnah would have the litigant saying, I possess it, it's mine, and they won't say I found it, we would still have this thing in our mind that perhaps seeing it is also enough. I mean, it happens to be that they're coming to the judge and saying, I own it, I possess it, it's mine. What about if I saw it? Is that enough? Maybe it's not enough. Maybe it is. Maybe it is, actually. It's just telling us that this is what they're coming to court. They're saying, I own it. What about if you saw it? Is that enough? So by telling us the situation is, I found it, meaning I saw it, and I own it, that's the Mishnah's way of teaching us. Remember I told you the Mishnah is really dense, and it wants to contain a lot of information in a small amount of language. So here we not only have the litigants making the statement, but by the way the statement is phrased by the editor of the Mishnah, we know that seeing it, finding it, seeing it is not enough, and that's why you have a redundancy. It's not really a redundancy, it's an intentional redundancy to teach a lesson about Jewish law. The lesson being seeing is not enough, right? Seeing may be believing, right? But seeing is not enough for ownership of property law. So be'alma tana ani Mesi'a, be'adar tana kula sheli. So we have the litigant saying both things. I found it and I own it. And Mishnah Yetara, from the redundancy in the language, Ashme'ina, I learned from this, that it's not enough just to see it, you actually have to have possession. That is the law. That is it. That is the end of part 1. Part 1 was the yeshiva. They were sitting down, they had this deliberation. I believe that this happened in Yeshivat from Bedita, which was, there was 2 major yeshivot in Babylonia. Whatever the reason for that belief is, it doesn't matter. But that's it. So this is how the Mishnah. Till there was one of the last Rashi Yeshivot, his name was Rav Papa, and they re-examined the issue. And when they re-examined the issue, they changed their mind. Like great minds, great men, great people, intelligent people are always willing to change their mind. Right? Give me an intelligent argument, say something I want to learn. Say it. Right? So they had this particular discussion, and everybody reached a conclusion, and they changed their mind. Originally they said that actually the case of the Mishnah, he says he found it, he says I own it, I possess it. In other words, no, I own it, I possess it. It's actually one case, right? That was the thesis. That thesis is not going to be rejected. They're going to have a different reading of the Mishnah, and this different reading of the Mishnah is actually going to be the reading that is accepted by all the Hachamim. And now if you open up Harambam, Perusha Mishnayot, when he explains the Mishnah, he doesn't explain it in accordance with the thesis that we already studied, but rather he explains the Mishnah in accordance with the second thesis, which will now be presented in part 2. So we are now reading part 2. Part 2 rejects the first thesis, presents the second thesis, and it's pretty, well, let's read it. Okay, here goes. And I believe we will be able to finish this tonight. Umi Masid Amar Hadakatanen. Is that really a correct explanation? That it's one case in the Mishnah? If you look at the words in the Mishnah, it says, he says, and he says. He says, I found it. He says, I found it. He says, I own it. He says, I own it. Right? Can you explain it that way? Can you explain that it's really one case? What's the problem here? Why not? So my answer is, yeah, why not? I don't understand why they're rejecting it. Why?
Because maybe you would say, he said, I found it, and I own it.
Okay,
He said,
same
I
thing,
found
but no, because the truth is the Mishnah does that a lot. It wants to be poetic. So then you notice it's 4 words. Ze omer, ani misateah, 4 words. Ze omer, ani misateah, 4 words. Ze omer kulashiri, ze omer kulashiri, 4 words, 4 words, 4 words, right? It's crazy how the Mishnah does that a lot. There's a very poetic structure to the Mishnah. They did it on purpose so people have it easier to understand to study Baal Peh. Exactly. There's another reason. I learned this from my father. My father, I forgot the name of the article. But okay, something, the ictic pronouns in Semitic philology, something like that. So let me explain to you. There are what's known as the ictic pronouns, and you really need to understand. It's not so hard, by the way. It's really easy. It sounds very fancy, but it's just an easy idea with a fancy word. And then when you understand what a deictic pronoun is, then you will be able to understand this particular thesis, why the yeshiva rejects the original understanding. What does the word zeh mean in Hebrew? Zeh. And this is this. I know, but what is this? You're right, it's a pronoun. Correct, it's a pronoun. There's different types of pronouns. There's deictic pronouns. A deictic pronoun is, can you pass me that napkin? I just pointed at it. I don't have to pass it to me. But I pointed at it, right? It's a specific napkin, right? I said it yesterday. I saw this beautiful car. It was a Ferrari. It was driving down the street. It's not a deictic pronoun, right? Right? Because I'm not pointing at it. So when you point at something, that's called a deictic pronoun. I'm specifying what I'm pointing at, and by pointing at something else. Now, in Jewish law, there's hamor zeh, and there's hamor hahu. And by the way, this works also in the Chumash as well. The word zeh, right, works in the Chumash. The word zeh in the Chumash is a deictic pronoun, meaning you're pointing at the object. So hamor zeh, I tell the guy, I want to buy this donkey. If I say hamor hahu is that I'm not pointing at the donkey. It's a regular pronoun. It's not a deictic pronoun. Give me that napkin. That's the napkin I want, right? Don't give me a napkin. I want that one. I just scribbled something on it. I don't want to lose it. Can you give me that napkin? Right? That's a deictic pronoun. You understand the idea? So hamor zeh means I want that donkey. I want to buy that donkey. Not hamor hahu. I didn't say some donkey somewhere. I want this one. So that's the idea. Yes, before we did.
No, but in the Torah, when it mentions zeh, when Moshe wasn't aware how to do something, when it said zeh, Hashem showed him exactly what to do.
Exactly correct. Bezeh ma'aseh hamenorah. The Chachamim say, what does it mean, bezeh ma'aseh hamenorah? Literally, Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu the image of the menorah in Har Sinai and pointed. Here's the menorah. You see it? That's a deictic pronoun. It works in the Torah. It's a beautiful kerah to understand. Kazera evekader. That look at the moon. You see it? There it is. That's why you make kedusha levana. You understand? It's an amazing idea. So that's the idea of a deictic pronoun.
There's one more about Moshe.
Yeah.
We went from Moshe.
What?
Menorah. I think the Shin
Say it again. I couldn't hear you.
there's 3 things. Moshe, Menorah.
Yeah.
The He is a Chodesh Hazeh.
Yeah.
And the Shin is something else. It was a Sheratzim, Shekatzim, something.
I think you're right. Yes. Interesting. Okay, we'll check it out later. So that's it. Now think about the language of the Mishnah. Ze omer ani mesatiya. That's one person. It's the dictator. Ze omer ani mesatiya. That's another person. Each ze is another person. Ze omer kula sheli. It's a third person. If it was the same person, you would say hahu omer kula sheli. The hahu omer. When you're repeating the same person, you don't say ze. Every time you say that and that and that and that, you're referring to something else. You're specifying. There were 4 deictic pronouns here, and each one is specifying a different person. So therefore, now you understand why Rav Papa sits down a generation later and he says, I don't like this explanation of the Mishnah, because this explanation of the Mishnah would have me assume that Rabbeinu HaKadosh was a sloppy chas v'shalom. Of course he wasn't, but I would have to assume that he used the deictic pronoun in a sloppy, imprecise way. No, we don't accept that. That's the reason they reject this interpretation of the Mishnah, and they offer thesis number 2, the second thesis, which is a different explanation. Amar Papa, Papa, therefore, in his yeshiva, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Fom Bedita, not really Fom Bedita, when Abaye and Abba passed away, they were the previous Rosh Yeshiva. Then he moved the yeshiva to a place called Naresh, not far from Bedita. Nevertheless, the yeshiva went with him. So Amar Papa, the Item Rav Shimi Asher, the Amre La Kedi means it was unanimously agreed, meaning some people say it was Rav Papa, the Rosh Yeshiva who made this declaration. Some people say it was Rav Shimi Asher. Some people say it was just a unanimous declaration. Everybody agreed that this is the correct reading of the Mishnah. And the correct reading of the Mishnah is as follows. Resha bim Mesi'a. The first cases in the Mishnah, Ze omer ani misatiya, Ze omer ani misatiya, that's dealing with the case where somebody found lost property. 2 people found lost property, they come before the judges, and each one says, I found it first. That's case number 1. The Sefa, and the second case, Ze omer kula sheli, Ze omer kula sheli, is not a repetition of the first case or an explanation of the first case. It's a completely different case. It's dealing with people who were in a store, who were doing business. There's an object that they wanted to buy. There was some dispute as to who the buyer was, who the seller was, whatever the dispute was, we'll see soon. And that's a completely different dispute. That's the thesis, okay? And we're going to explain exactly what happened. So the first case of 2 people finding it is what we said. You're grabbing one side, it's mine. And you say, no, it's mine, right? Okay, that's case number 1. Someone say, I found it first. He said, no, I found it first. What are you talking about? Okay. Second case is Mekach U'Mekach. Let me tell you what happened. You can imagine the shuk. You ever go to the shuk in Tel Aviv? So that people are pushing, people are shoving, and this and that. You go into a place, you want to buy something, right? You see your wife wanting to get like a finjan set. She wanted a copper finjan, exactly what she wants. You're running inside. You want to buy it. Somebody else sees it. No, I want to get it. So you throw the money on the thing. No, I'm paying right now. I'm going to take it. $100. Here's $100. Other guy throws $100 there. And there's a tussle over who gets the finjan, who gets a finjan set. They're all both holding the box, and each one says, I paid him first. Now they come before the judge, and the guy says, I paid for it. And the other guy says, I paid for it. They both really paid for it, right? They both threw the money and ran with the object, and now they're coming before the Dayanim, or the Dayanim or Yerushalayim. Next to Machanim, you have all the yeshivot, all the Batei Knesset. The Dayanim are in the shuk. They say, what's going on? Stop! Look! Hey, what are you doing? You weren't disrespectful to the Dayan, right? You wouldn't be disrespectful. So
Rabbi,
there's this.
can this be analogized in the modern day to a fight over a parking spot?
Not exactly. I'll tell you why. It could be analogized, but it's not exactly the same thing. You have no ownership. You have no ownership over that object. Here,
Both paid.
right. But it's a little different. I mean, I understand your point, but it's legally different because here it's chattel. It's movable property. So the laws of movable property are different than what you're describing, where nobody has an actual ownership in the parking space. But there should be some rules. Interesting. I never even thought of, that's a tough one. I don't know the Gemara. Can you, Phil, we'll have to have another Gemara. Masechet parking spaces. When the Mashiach comes, what do you do with that? I came in for the back. No, I was there for the front. Yeah, right, okay, maybe.
Rabbi, shouldn't we ask the owner who we agreed to sell to?
I'm sorry? Oh, we'll see. That's a great question. Why is it a great question? Because it's going to be dealt with in the Sugya. Okay. All right. So usricha, and I need both cases. Meaning, I need to have a case where 2 people found the lost object, and I need to have a case where 2 people are fighting over something they supposedly bought. The itara Mesi'a, if the
Next page.
Yeah, next page, okay. The Itana Mesi'a. If I only had the first case of the Mishnah, the case where two people come into the court and they say, I found it. If I just had that case, I would say as follows. In the case of two people claiming the same lost object as being the first ones to take it, I would say, you know what? The reason the Hakamim imposed the Shabu'ah, Mishum de Moreh be'amal, Havra elav miti hasel ba. The guy is saying, you know what? Like, did you own this? You didn't really own it. Okay, let's say you really found this first. Let's say, and you're grabbing. I'm like, I'm trying to grab it from you now. I'm saying, you know what? It's not like you lost anything. You never owned this. Oh, you just found it now. So for a second you owned it. Okay, I'm grabbing it from you. Now I come to court, and in my mind I'm saying, you know, you never really owned it. I want it. That's it. I'm taking it. What is he going to go? It's not like I'm robbing something from his house. I'm not robbing something from his house. I know that he saw it first. I'm going to lie to the judges and say I found it first. In that case, no. Make a Shavuah. Let's bring out the Sefer Torah. You're willing to make a Shavuah on a Sefer Torah? Oh, no, I'm not going to make a Shavuah on a Sefer Torah. But because it's such a light situation where I can easily fool myself, and say I'm not really doing anything wrong, it's a lost object. I took it. So what? Right? In that case, because he's going to tell himself, he didn't lose anything. I took it. So what? I lied. Big deal. What am I going to do? We're going to do it 50-50 anyway. He's going to get 50%. I'm going to get 50%. What is the big deal? So he doesn't get the whole object. But in the case of an object where we're fighting over an object in a store, that's different. He just paid for the object. After he paid for the object, he really becomes the owner of the object. If he became the owner of the object, I'm not going to lie in court and say that I paid for it first. So we need to have both situations described in the Mishnah. I'm reading quickly because I know many of you want to go home. We're going to be done at 9:15. That's my guarantee. So we have another 10 minutes or whatever. Is everybody okay? If somebody needs to leave, I will not get angry. Okay. Who just left? Okay. So now I know I have to say Mesi'a. I have to bring the case of two people found an object because we need to impose a Shavuah on those people. They might end up lying. What about Mekach Memka? What about in the case of the store where two people pay for the same object? If we both enter a store, I need Finjan Achwaset for my wife. He needs a Finjan Achwaset for his wife. I paid for it. What's a big deal? What is a big deal? He's going to go to court now, and I'm going to lie, and I'm going to say to the judge, I paid for it first. And there's no Shavuah, assuming there's no Shavuah. I'm going to lie. Why am I lying? Take your money, go to another store, find another Finjan Achwaset. What is the big deal? What is the big deal? This is what I'm telling myself in my mind, right? Another Havrai, let him go to spend 10 minutes, find another Finjan Achwaset. Mesi'a. So in that case, I may end up lying. That's why the Hachamim say, no, hold on 1 second. Make a Shavuah. Make a Shavuah. You willing to make a Shavuah? Oh, you're not, are you? Okay, because you're not gonna make a Shavuah Shav, right? A Shavuah Sheket, right? Aval Mesi'a delek as Shavuah Shav. Aval Mesi'a delek al memarachi emala sericha. But in the case of a lost object, you don't have that type of logic. So the point being, we need to bring case number 1, Mesi'a. Case number 2, Mekach or Memka. We bring both cases to emphasize that in both situations, the Dayanim will impose a Shavuah upon the litigants, and in this way we prevent them from lying, coming to court, and trying to unjustly enrich themselves. Make a Shavuah, you're not going to lie about the Shavuah. There is one question, and after that one question, we are done. Okay. That means we finish an entire Sugya. All right. So the question is as follows. Okay.
Rabbi, quick question. If the guy swears,
Yeah.
and we found out he's lying, do we judge him like Edzomem?
No, that's not an Edzomem. Edzomem would only be where you had the two witnesses come to court, they testify whatever they testify. A second set of witnesses come and say, wait, you're testifying that you saw this and this in that place on that time? That's weird because you weren't there at that time, you were with us. We saw you in a completely different way. That's an Edzomem. This has nothing to do with
You
Edzomem.
say if he swears that it belongs to me and we find out that doesn't belong to him.
No, it's not Edzomem. Edzomem is when you're testifying about a third person. That's testimony. That's Edut. This is not Edut. I mean, this is the laws of To'en Benit'an. It's a different set of laws. There's Ilchot Edut, where you're testifying about a third person. To'en Benit'an means you're saying about yourself. You're either making a ta'ana, or you're defending yourself from a ta'ana. That's a different set of laws. That's a different set. There's nothing to do with Edim Zomemi.
So there's no damages, he doesn't have to pay any damages?
No, that's a different story. What the Dayanim do will be different. If there was, in the case of Shevuat Shav or Shevuat Shaket, there could theoretically be Malkut. There could be, put that on the side. Whatever the liability is for Shevuat Shav or Shevuat Shaket, it depends on the situation, but it's a severe situation, okay? What happens Me'ah Shamayim is much worse than what the Dayanim will impose upon it. Okay, let's continue. So you saying what, and this is a question that you asked me before, you're telling me that the Mishnah is actually talking about the second case in the Mishnah, is talking about a case where they both went to the store, they saw an object, they wanted to buy it. You asked the question, Mekach or Memcha, that's a problem. They went to a store, they want to buy something, they both pay for the same thing. V'nyach says, just go to the owner of the store, say, Yossi, it says, who paid you first? Oh yeah, I remember these two people who were fighting. Moshe paid me first. Ask him, why do you have to make a Shavuah? Answer, La Sericha. We need to make a Shavuah. It could be that both people threw the money. One of them maybe was willingly, the other person unwillingly, meaning the owner didn't want to have both people throwing the money at him. He just wanted, he needs one sale, right? He has one object. So one threw it against his will. Now the thing is, there's a ruckus, there's screaming, who knows what's going on, children are crying, I didn't even know, I don't know, who did I get the money from? It's a shuk, people are screaming, there's noise, there's this, and they're both fighting, who gave him the money first? I don't know, get the money first. So now you have to make a Shavuah. That's why the Shavuah is there. The Shavuah is there because if the owner of the store knows, then the owner of the store knows, no problem, so don't Shavuah. But here he doesn't know. He doesn't know where he got the money from. So in that case, they both have to make a Shavuah. That's the answer. I just want to summarize the Sugya. We have 2-3 minutes. We'll summarize the Sugya. If there's any questions, if there's time for questions, but make it short because I don't want to keep people here beyond the time. But the point of the Sugya is we have this Mishnah. The Mishnah has an extra sentence in it. That sentence number 1, that's fine, but then it says that's sentence number 2. What does that sentence mean? According to thesis number 1, the first part of the Mishnah, sentence number 2 was just a continuation of sentence number 1. It's dealing with people who found an object. Each one claims the object is his, and they were saying what they said for whatever reason. That was thesis number 1. That thesis is rejected. The reason it's rejected is because of the iktik pronoun ze. Ze means this person is separate from this person, is separate from this person, is separate from this person. You can't tell me that ze omer kula sheli is referring to ze omer ani misateh. It's a different person. So what does that mean? It's dealing with the store. And it's a beautiful chidush from one of my favorites, Sefaradi Chachamim. He was born in Venice in the 17th century. Rabbi David Pardo. We have some of his songs in his Monbik. What's the name? Yamaseh Kivin Lachamana. It's a beautiful song that he wrote. He was a poet, beautiful Meshorer. And he has a wonderful, I have an old book in my house, the original edition of David Pardo, Shoshanim le David, and he says something beautiful. He says, if you look at the word Ze Omer Kula Sheli, look at the statement. He says, it all belongs to me. He said, what is the basis for such an assertive statement? It all belongs, it's all mine. He says, that's a remez. That insinuates a situation of money. Who would say it's all mine? A person who paid for something in a store, and it really is all his, and he's saying it's all mine. So you see the language and the precise words chosen by Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Kula Sheli, it's all mine. That's Mekach or Memkach. That can only be in a context of, I paid for it. I paid for it. It's mine, right? So you see the beauty, the precision of the Mishnah. It's wonderful, the Gemara. That was it. That was the end of the discussion. Next week we will have another discussion, or whatever it is. We have the next class. You're all in the WhatsApp group, I assume. So we will see what the next class is. Any she'elot, arot?
Yeah. So you're saying don't trust an Israeli, correct? Is that the bottom line? Some are wonderful people. There's some wonderful people there. That's the truth.
but, right, you wanna be, what I am saying is that if you wanna own something, grab it really fast and say, ah, I got it, okay?
How about like football?
Right, exactly.
Football, I like.
Rabbi Hananiah, and I can share it. That's not
Back to Mesi'a, and then we go back after for like a month and a half, and we come back.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Actually, this is the first time we have Just try to get that. It's very chill. A lot of times at work. I work till like 7 p.m. every day. So I'm going to translate.
Stay right here.
Also, Joseph Morgan. Yeah, I think it's something yet. Yeah, you guys, I'm rolling. I'm not rushing.
Fantastic, brother. Beautiful.